On May 13, 1997, in the state of Arizona, a set of 7 giant amber lights were seen floating over the city of Phoenix. These lights were lined up in a triangular boomerang shape, each perfectly equidistant from each other. The phenomenon hovered through the heart of Phoenix less than 2,000 feet above the ground and was dead silent. To this day, nobody has been able to properly explain what was seen that night. Hey buddy, my name's Gregory and welcome to Tell Me More, the series where we explore the strange and unexplained. I remember 1997 really well. That was the year that we got a Nintendo 64 for Christmas, and that was the year of the Hale-Bopp comet. Hale-Bopp was visible for much of the spring of '97, and people would have habitually looked up at the sky every night in an attempt to get a view of the comet. And because of this, many more people in Arizona saw these lights than any other mass UFO sighting in modern history. At least 10,000 people laid eyes on the Phoenix lights as they drifted across the state. There have been many mass UFO sightings throughout history. At least 4,000 people witnessed a formation of lights fly over the Washington Capitol in 1952. A few thousand people saw an apparent UFO war over the skies of Nuremberg, Germany in 1561. But despite the number of people that saw it, and the demand for answers from hundreds of witnesses, they've been met largely by silence and weak explanations. So, what really happened in the skies over Phoenix, Arizona? We take for granted that we can talk freely about supernatural events today. When people see a UFO, they can post their experience on Reddit and thousands of people will come out to support them. But it wasn't that long ago that talking about UFOs made you look like a crazy person. The media would mock you and block the information from spreading, like in the case of the 1952 sighting over the Washington Capitol. This attitude was still prevalent as recently as 1997, when witnesses and investigators of the Phoenix lights were mocked and ridiculed by the media and by elected officials. City Councilwoman Frances Barwood merely asked the question at a council meeting. Not only did the mayor and council completely ignore her question as if she never even asked it, but the media completely lampooned her. However, this is when the attitude would start to turn around, because this prompted hundreds of people to call into the city demanding answers for what they saw. The mayor's response to inquiries about the lights was to say, "We don't have UFOs in Phoenix," which was quite frustrating to the councilwoman because she didn't say that it was a UFO, she just wanted to know what the lights were. But it would seem that the city council would want to memory hole this incident immediately. Even the police lied, quoting to the media that very few people called in about the lights that night, which wasn't true. Hundreds of people called in to report what they saw that night. Several airline pilots reported the lights while trying to take off from the local international airport, and air traffic control could even see them through their windows, but they weren't able to pick them up on their radar screens. Everyone was baffled. When the nearby Nellis Air Force Base was asked about the lights, they initially stated that there were no planes in the air at that time, which was extremely confusing to the thousands of people who knew for a fact that something flew over the city. After weeks of silence, the governor at the time, Fife Symington, eventually called a press conference claiming to have solved the Phoenix Lights mystery. However, he only ended up mocking the witnesses who wanted answers.
And now I'll ask Officer Stein and his colleagues to escort the accused into the room so that we may all look upon the guilty party. Don't get him too close to me, please.
He later said that he did this to cut tensions. And after all these years, I can see now how he might have thought that humor might have been the right course of action at the time. You know, he was probably between a rock and a hard place, not being told anything from the Air Force, yet hundreds or thousands of people demanding answers from him. But this only really ended up serving to make everybody angry. 2 years before the Phoenix Lights incident, in 1995, medical doctor Lynn Ketai and her husband were watching the city of Phoenix from their home in the northern hills when she noticed strange lights floating across the southern mountain. She managed to capture a handful of photos, the most impressive depicting 4 lights in a row. And a couple years after that, a few months before the Phoenix Lights incident, in January of 1997, she managed to capture an 18-second clip of 2 lights in front of the mountain, and when she went to grab her camera to take a photo, 5 more lights appeared above them. This was eerily similar to the famous display of 7 lights that would be seen later that year in May. And at 8:30 p.m. on May 13th, the night of the Phoenix Lights, the first sightings were reported in northwestern Arizona. A poor quality video was recorded by Terry Proctor 2 hours before the mass sighting in Phoenix. I can't show you much, unfortunately, because of copyright reasons. But the first couple frames clearly depict 5 lights in a V formation. When you piece all of the sightings together from that night, it seems as if the phenomenon started somewhere around Henderson, Nevada, just south of Las Vegas, and it drifted from northwest to southeast all the way across the state of Arizona, right across the heart of Phoenix, and ended somewhere around Casa Grande. Whatever these lights were, it seems as if there might have been 3 separate entities. 5 lights that were stuck in a V formation as if they were part of a single craft, and apparently 2 other lights that could dance around freely and sometimes docked with the other lights, making a formation of 7. But these lights would fade in and out, seemingly at random. Sometimes you could only see 3 lights. The lights were large, amber orange, very bright, and appeared as if they were deep set inside of something. A handful of people reported seeing a V-shaped craft that these lights were attached to. A few witnesses said the craft was somewhat transparent, like they could see the outline of the ship, but the stars were somewhat visible through it. And other witnesses said that the craft was completely blocking out the stars in the night sky. The lights very slowly glided through the center of town, close to the ground, only a couple hundred to a couple thousand feet, which from that distance, witnesses claimed that the craft had to have been at least a mile wide, which was later confirmed by video analysis. The thing was absolutely enormous. Of all the UFO sightings caught on tape, this is the hardest one to debunk. Normally I would claim trick of the eye, misidentified helicopters, ball lightning, or hoax. But none of those answers work here. There's no way of knowing what people really saw that night, whether it was 7 separate lights in a formation or 1 large craft, whether it was from Earth or from space. All I can say for sure is that it was real, that thousands of witnesses saw something that they claim is entirely unexplainable that night. And to this day, there doesn't really seem to be a good answer as to what it might be. If you're new here and you're enjoying this video so far, make sure to hit subscribe and the notification bell now so you never miss another episode. I upload new content every Thursday. And make sure to check out the Tell Me More playlist for hours of content to keep you entertained and thinking. Remember how I said the Air Force initially claimed that there were no planes in the sky that night? Well, they came out a few days later and claimed that there actually was a jet in the air that night, an A-10 Warthog on a training exercise over the Barry-Goldwater Range, and it was dropping flares that just so happened to dissipate in a perfect V-shaped formation that then were carried across the city by the wind. There are a couple problems with that answer, one being that flares let off a lot of magnesium smoke, which is really easy to see because the light from the flare always illuminates the trail. And 2, flares always fall in a somewhat random pattern. They can end up in a perfect V shape, but the chances of them staying like that for a long time as they drift across a large distance is next to impossible. The wind almost always carries them in slightly different directions as they fall at slightly different rates. And 3, the Barry-Goldwater Range is pretty far away from Phoenix. From the angle that we see the lights in the infamous video, it would be impossible to see these flares because there's an entire mountain in the way. And as I said, the lights were seen below the peak of the mountain. A few media outlets quite pretentiously pat themselves on the back, claiming that it's been solved. It was a formation of planes, because one kid claimed to see a formation of planes flying over the city at high altitude through his telescope. That was the story that the initial newspaper report went with, and they just stuck with that ever since. I really don't get this, because 1, air traffic control couldn't see any planes on their radar, and 2, the Air Force denied any such activity that night. It's such a weak explanation. The UFO community often likes to use the infamous TR-3B as their go-to explanation, a proposed experimental triangular aircraft that the Air Force supposedly has been secretly using since the 1980s. And to their credit, the TR-3B is often depicted as having 3 bright red lights on the belly of the hull, and is a perfect black triangular shape. This would explain what people saw that night. There also seems to be a patent for this craft, but that doesn't mean anything. There are so many patents for things that don't actually exist and can't exist. Patents only depict the intention and possibility of a device. There's a couple problems with this one, of course. There's no reason to believe that humanity has the ability to build anything a mile wide, let alone futuristic alien-like technology. And 2, there's no reason to believe that the TR-3B actually exists. Sure, there are a few photographs depicting TR-3Bs, and there's a patent for it, and the whole UFO community knows that it exists. Wait, is this thing real? No, right? And this last one sounds the craziest, but who knows? This might be the explanation. Perhaps the military was testing a top-secret technology on the population of Phoenix, creating holographic projections in the sky, an illusion device, an airborne holographic projector that can create images in mid-air. There used to be a time that you could find all sorts of information about this online, but it seems to be mostly memory hold from the internet. But the idea is there might be secret holographic imaging technology that can be used to create fake jets in the air to trick enemy fighters. And if this exists, hypothetically, it could also be used to create fake UFO events or fake large-scale religious events in the sky. Around the mid to late 90s, there were a ton of similar events to the Phoenix Lights. There were mass UFO sightings in Russia, Israel, Asia, South America, and some other crazy sightings like large-scale religious displays, and most famously, the floating cities in China. These were chalked up to being an optical illusion caused by smog. But what if these were all demonstrations of similar technology? To see an extension of this video with more details about the Phoenix Lights phenomenon, and to hear some of my personal thoughts on the story, head on over to my Patreon. There are a few reasons to think that this whole thing was not what it seemed. First, we have the video of the lights appearing in front of the mountains. These could very well be flares. This video is fairly short and does not depict the entire evening's events. And the other video from earlier that night seems kind of different. It's similar, sure, but this could very well be a formation of planes. There was that child who claimed to see planes flying in formation through his telescope that night. Perhaps it was just a coincidence that those flares appeared over the city a few moments before. Perhaps it was the flares that the air traffic control saw that night because they said they couldn't pick it up on radar. And flares don't really throw off much of a radar signal. Then after that is when all the residents of the town saw the planes flying overhead. The other problem with the story is that the reports are inconsistent. Some people reported seeing a large craft connected to lights, but that might have just been their minds filling in the blanks. The lights were so uniform, it would be logical to assume that they were part of a large ship, and with the sky being pitch black, it might have been a simple optical illusion that created the image of the V-shaped craft. Only a small percentage of people said that they could see the craft, which doesn't really give me great confidence that it was actually there to begin with. Some people said that it was blocking out the stars behind it. Some people said that they could see the craft, but it was kind of transparent. But most people didn't say anything about a craft. Then there's the number of lights. Some people said that they only saw 3 lights, some people said that there were 5, a lot of people said that there were 7, but a handful of people said that there were 9. Yes, there were always an odd number with 1 light in the center, but how do you end up with such a wide variety of descriptions by something that was seen by 10,000 people? Seems kind of suspicious. There's also the possibility that this was early drone technology. Drones today can fly in extremely intricate formations, making any shape you want. To someone who's never seen this before, this would look impossible. I also have to ask, why is it that so many UFO witnesses end up becoming these euphoric believers in aliens? Quite a few people came out of this story not only becoming professional UFO advocates, but also ended up spouting the same crap about achieving world peace and ending pollution. And those are good things, don't get me wrong, I'm not knocking the message, but it's just so stereotypical of UFO witnesses. I can't help but feel that they're all just playing it up, trying to breathe life into something that doesn't really have legs to stand on. But Kurt Russell said that he saw the lights.
I saw 6 lights over the airport in absolute uniform in a V shape. We're maybe a half a mile out, and Oliver said, "Pa, what are those lights?" He said, "Are we okay here?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm gonna call him," and I reported it.
And what am I gonna do? Argue with Kurt Russell? No way. If he says that he saw the lights, that's good enough for me. Wait, did he say 6 lights? What the hell? Tell me what you guys think. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my second channel, Armored Gregory, where I make vlogs responding to some of my favorite comments. And be sure to check out our podcast, Full Metal Tuxedo, where my co-writer and I discuss more about the kind of stuff we talk about on this show, the strange and unexplained. And of course, I have to thank my patrons and channel members for supporting my work. I couldn't do this without you. You're amazing.